Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. My internet was gone at the correct moment. At just when I was about to start, the internet went off. So I was sitting here waiting. Thank you for waiting. I hope the audio is coming fine. Refresh your video a bit so that you can start watching the video, because otherwise YouTube doesn't start the video. So I will have to check all the comments here first before starting today. After that, I won't get into the comment section too much, because I will have to finish what I'm planning to read out here. So something incredible happened yesterday. I uh, Based on something I was checking out or reading, I just casually stumbled upon this book by Veer Savarkar. Okay, this book is called The War of Independence of 1857. So I did not know that he has written a book by this name. I found it on Amazon. Then I saw that that button of read a sample is given on Amazon. Okay, so I immediately clicked on that. And usually what happens in this sample thing is that most books, especially if they are insanely popular, don't even have any sample section on the Amazon site. Okay, and even if there is a sample, there's hardly about 3-4 pages and the introduction or the preface. This book has about 3 to 4 chapters in the sample itself, and the preface and the introduction, which I think is the longest sample in all of the books that are there on Amazon. So I did not know that that the sample is so big. I did not scroll the entire thing. So I just started reading, and I was making my girlfriend listen to it. So, and I didn't tell her who has written this. So and this was the first time I was reading something written by Veer Savarkar. All these times I have only heard people talk about Veer Savarkar, or I've read little things written about Veer Savarkar. I haven't read Vikram Sampat's book yet. This was the first time I was reading something written by himself. Now I start reading. I thought, okay, maybe it will be a little bit of the introduction, it will be little bit of the chapter. Then I go on reading and go on reading. The chapters keep starting and finishing. But what struck me the most was his writing skill. Now I have read one poem written by him, and my reading video is on my channel as well. It was on one of my, I think, I don't remember in which video I read that poem by Veer Savarkar. And reading this book was written in 1909. It struck me what a brilliant writer he was. Now there are so many great people India has not appreciated enough. They have died forgotten deaths, or they have died when they were criticized or infamous. Later on, they became popular, like Sitaram Goel. Sitaram Goel's fate was, I think, obviously worse than Veer Savarkar. Veer Savarkar at least is remembered. People at least have heard his name. Sitaram Goel's name was not even known by 95% of the country before BJP came to power this time. Then, when while reading it, I thought that I think this is one of those books that absolutely needs to be taught in high school, at least up until the class 7, 8, 9, that kind of standards. Okay, because there is some amount of emotionalness in the writing, which I don't think is very apt for the higher standard kids if they want to pursue history as a significant subject later on in their careers, in which they should not be bringing emotions into their research. But as for kids, most of whom will not go into um, studying history or researching history as a profession, they should just know what the flavor of those times were. And for that, I think this book is absolutely brilliant. At least I thought so when I was reading the excerpt. Now that in the comment section I'm reading that, no, a lot of things were wrong, and maybe Veer Savarkar himself corrected himself on a lot of those points. But I'm contrasting his writing skills with the stuff, with the crap I read in my ISC school history. Especially the Revolt of 1857 section was a torture to read. It was an eyesore. It was a brain sore. All those dates and doctrine of lapse, bullshit terms. No narrative, no storytelling in that fucking horseshit of our writing skill. Okay, in our school textbooks, those I think need to be immediately replaced by Sanjeev Sanyal and this book by Veer Savarkar, if they are factually correct. I think it is factually correct, but the conclusions are different. Now, those high school kids can't be, middle school kids can't be asked to read the entire book anyway. So why not give the excerpts of this book where the facts are discussed and leave the conclusions away. We don't have to discuss the conclusion that whether, yeah, it was such a great Hindu-Muslim unity thing. Even if that is wrong, we don't even have to discuss it in the in the school classroom. But at least discuss the facts, because the way those facts are presented here, that is absolutely beautiful. And while I was reading it, all of a sudden a surprise section came in. I'll tell you when I'm reading it now as well. uh, so the live stream today is basically just for reading that excerpt, that sample section of Amazon, which is about 3 4 chapters long. Okay, I could not stop my tears. I just managed to hold my tears back barely, because I was on a video call with my girlfriend and reading to her, and I did not want her to know who wrote this book, and so I did not. So she would not understand why tears came out of my eyes all of a sudden, because such a writing coming from this guy who has been so misunderstood, so hated for decades and decades. Such a man writing such incredible paragraphs and imagery and analogies and comparisons. Okay, you all won't believe. Those of you who have not read this book won't believe what's about to hit you in your ears at the moment. And now tell me in the comment section how many of you have read this book, and how many of you have read something by Veer Savarkar, any book. I just want to get a vibe. Okay, now let me just check a little bit of the comments. Um, I like the most in entire freedom movement is Veer Savarkar and Nathuram Godse. 1857 was not first war of independence. 1857 was jihad by Muslims to re-establish Mughal Empire. Hindus who fought were either naive or fought for personal reasons. Savarkar was wrong about 1857. There were fatwas issued against Hindus. Not only that, Hindus were attacked by Muslims. This myth of 1857 is propagated by both left and right because it suits their politics. I see. Now, I have not read enough about 1857 to judge whether you are right or wrong. But when I first heard those accusations that Muslims weren't really fighting for any Hindu-Muslim unity or for their country, um, I was inclined to believe it. But then the only reason at the moment, so far at least, I have the view that uh, that Muslims were not doing it just for jihad is because Sir Syed Ahmed Khan criticized the Muslims who participated in Revolt of 1857 very heavily, harshly, rudely, and crudely. Okay, he absolutely destroyed those people. He was very, very angry with the Muslims who participated in Revolt of 1857. I wonder why that is then, if this was not a freedom movement. Sir Syed Ahmed Khan would have been happy that, yeah, what a great thing you did, because he was the guy who officially came up with the two nation theory. Okay, some more comments. Yeah, by the way, it is a part of selected works of Veer Savarkar with 4 books, and this is the first one. Other 3 are My Transportation for Life, Hindu Rashtra Darshan, and Six Glorious Epochs of History. Yeah, I think those are the books that's always sit behind Kushal Mehra, right? Those black books, black color cover books. Ambedkar 1857 was really a jihad proclaimed by Muslims against the British. Okay, Ambedkar has said this. The mutiny was an attempt by the Muslims to reconvert India into a Darul Islam. In which book did he say this? Pakistan or Partition of India? Indian Sepoy Mutiny of 1857, or War of Independence as it is now described in India and Pakistan, was an archaic attempt of the Indian Muslims to recover their lost power in India. Interesting. So yeah, what I'm saying is that the conclusions don't matter. The facts that this guy participated and this guy participated, that is going to be taught in schools anyway. So why not teach it this way with Savarkar's writing skills? That's all I'm saying. Dada, you should follow Millet more closely. Some amazing politics he is implementing. I also found Buenos Aires to Argentina is like Kolkata to the rest of Bengal. Yes, it's full of commies. Yes, I'm ready with the books of Vikram Sampath and Uday Mahurkar. Okay, Hindu leaders participated for their local reasons. In many cases, the constituencies of these leaders had a majority Muslim population, which compelled them to take part in the mutiny. I see. R.C. Majumdar is saying the Hindus oppressed by the Muslims were depressed at the success of the mutiny and daily offered prayers to God for the return of the English. What the fuck? I'm talking about mutiny 1857. Okay. Still, most soldiers who mutinied were Purbiyas, Hindus, Rajputs, and Brahmins, Kayasthas, other castes from Bihar. Muslims took advantage of genuine discomfort of others. The Hindus who you mentioned supported British were Bengalis and Punjabi Sikhs mostly. Uh, It was a Purbia's revolt appropriated by Muslims. Later on, only some Marathas revolted. Arey baap re. Nevertheless, every group has revolted in some way or the other at different times. Just it was not together at all at once, so they were unsuccessful. Yeah, that is the truth. By the way, Neeraj and Kelkarji discussed and criticized this book of. Oh, I see. Interesting. अच्छा देखते हैं तो आज टाइम मिले तो वो भी देख लेंगे. Let's see how much time it takes. If anyone wants to know what really happened in 1857, read this book, The 1857 Jihad by Professor Sheshrao B. More. Okay. No, one book, one guy's one book, one view cannot be the sole conclusion. If you recommend me multiple people, then I'm fine. As you recommended already, R.C. Majumdar, Ambedkar, etc. So I'm more inclined to believe you. Yes, that was a book which was discussed by Niraji and Kelkarji. I see. Jaipur Dialogues also had an episode on the same topic. Bhagat Singh was so inspired by this 1857 book that he published 2,000 copies of this book and sent the first two copies to Veer Savarkar as a symbol of respect when he was in house arrest. Bhai kya ho raha hai? But Savarkar ji was wrong to criticize the Sikhs and Rajputs and a great lyricist. I see. What a weird history we have, man. Sir Syed was himself an archetypical jihadi. Yes, he wanted Victorian Islamic style society. Yeah, then yeah, why did he criticize the Muslims taking part in revolt of 1857? Because they were too united with Hindus. That's what I have learned from his letters, which has been talked about in India, Bharat, Pakistan by JSI Deepak. Titumir also fought for Darul Islam. Yeah, Titumir is no question that he was fighting for Darul Islam. But since Sir Syed Ahmed Khan was criticizing these guys, that's the only reason I'm a bit confused. Yes, bhai, in page 332 to 333 of Savarkar volume 2, it is mentioned that Veer Savarkar later understood the oh, I see. Okay, so but that doesn't mean today's live stream is a flop show. We are going to basically appreciate Veer Savarkar's writing skills, authorship skills. Okay, just for those of you who don't know anything about it, hopefully सब लोगों को तो लग रहा है मुझसे ज़्यादा मालूम है. तो जिनको नहीं मालूम है वो लोग देखो कि कितना अच्छा लिखते थे वो. कहाँ गया? Sir Syed criticized because British had turned against Muslims after 1857. Yes, he wanted rapprochement with British against Hindus. You know that's one thing I have that's one thing I have been having a hunch about, that he was probably doing sort of a कोर्स करेक्शन दैट नो नो नो, ये नहीं नहीं हमसे गलती हो गया, ये देखो कितने कितने खराब है ये लोग, हम तो ऐसा नहीं चाहते थे कभी. आई थिंक दैट वाज हिज एटीट्यूड. इट माइट बी द केस. Then तो unanimously yes, that revolt of 1857 was not really a war of independence, unfortunately. Okay. So we will read the preface. It's just a one-page preface as well, because who has translated and what were their thoughts behind the translation, that has also been given. I have not read the preface actually, so I don't know if it is Savarkar himself who translated his book. Oh, that's one other important point I wanted to make. Okay, so this book was not originally in English. I don't know if it was in Marathi or Hindi, either of those two. But my point is the writing is so lucid and so easy, so smooth, so beautiful, that it pisses me off with the Amartya Sen translation I have and the Sanjeev Sanyal translation I have. Sanjeev Sanyal book's translation, Ocean of Churn, is very badly translated. Badly in the sense that some of the sentence that does not even make sense. They know that no one's going to read this. It's a very unpopular book. The English one is not popular in Bengal, तो वो बंगाली वर्जन तो और भी अनपॉपुलर है, कोई पढ़ेगा भी नहीं, एक छोटे पब्लिशर से निकला है, तो बहुत ही घटिया पब्लिक ट्रांसलेशन हुआ है. अमर्त्य सेन का बुक जो है उसका वो एक्चुअली वाज इन इंग्लिश. आई हैव बॉट द बंगाली वर्जन जस्ट टू improve my Bengali vocabulary, and in that book I'm noticing that the Bengali woman who has translated this has basically put in all her Bengali knowledge, skills that she has maybe learned when she was doing a Bengali masters or PhD. She has given all of that in every sentence. It's a completely unreadable book. I'm having to read each and every sentence thrice, four times. Otherwise, there's no way you can understand it in a modern day Bengali society. No one fucking speaks that way. It's extremely hard. This is tougher than Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Okay, each and every sentence you'll have to look up in the dictionary. जो ज्ञान था सब दे दिया है. ट्रांसलेशन है नहीं, वो नॉर्मल भाषा में का बुक ही नहीं है. What an irritating translation. Okay, now let's start. The book on the history of 1857 was originally written in an Indian vernacular. an Indian vernacular, so not, I don't know Marathi or Hindi. But owing to the unique nature of the book, which for the first time ever since the Great War was fought, proves from the English writers themselves that the rising of the Indian people in 1857 was in no way an insignificant chapter in or a tale unworthy of a great people's history. Pressing requests were made from many quarters to translate the work into the English language so that by translations into the other vernaculars, the whole of the Indian nation might be enabled to read the history of the ever memorable War of 1857. Realizing the reason and importance of these requests, and with the kind permission of the author, the publishers undertook the translation of the original into the English language. With the patriotic cooperation of many of their countrymen, they are able to today they are able today to place this work in the hands of Indian readers. So, when Dr. Shashi Tharoor says that basically if Veer Savarkar had died in Andaman prison, then he would be considered as big of a hero as uh, any other freedom fighter. What his actions were after coming out of the prison, those are always questioned and in controversy. So maybe Shashi Tharoor is saying that because he has also read this one. The work of translating an Oriental work into a Western tongue has ever been a task of immense difficulty, even when the translator has all the facilities which leisure and training could afford. But when the translation had to be done by diverse hands and within a very short time, it was clearly foreseen by the publishers that the translation would not be defective and unidiomatic. But the main point before the publishers was not to teach the Indian people how to make an elegant translation, not to show them how to write correct English, points to which they were supremely indifferent, but to let them know how their nation fought for its independence, and how their ancestors died for the ashes of their fathers and the temples of their gods. So the publishers decided to run the risk of publishing the book as soon as it could explain the facts it had to tell, though none could be more conscious of the faults of the language than they themselves. 50 years have passed, and yet those who died for the honor of their soul and race are looked upon as madmen and villains by the world abroad. So they are talking about 1909. They are writing this preface in 1909. So just 50 years have passed. Imagine what a time. Just 50 years before the revolt of 1857 has happened, while their own kith and kin for whom they shed their blood are ashamed even to own them. To allow this state of public opinion, born of stupid ignorance, and purposely and systematically kept up by a band of interested hirelings, to continue any longer would have been a national sin. So the publishers have not waited till the language of this translation could be rendered elegant, which would be more shameful, to let hideous calumny hover over and smother down the spirit of martyrdom, or to let some mistake creep into a book admittedly translated into a foreign tongue. The first at the best was a crime, and the second at the worst a venial literary offense. Therefore, the publishers owe no apology to uh, nor would be asked for by the Indian readers for whose special benefit this work is published. But to those sympathetic foreign readers who might be inclined to read this book, we owe an apology for the faults of the language and crave their indulgence for the same. London, 1909. Okay, let's see now. Why do I hear a helicopter sound? Do you hear a helicopter sound? Then it might be a internet connection issue, for because of which the bandwidth is getting affected, because of which those noises are coming. And my voice also sometimes might become like a phone loudspeaker. That's all bandwidth issues. The story of this history. This is the introduction, okay? Okay, so Savarkar is starting his book with a quote from Shakespeare. Kya din the? An honest tale speeds best, being plainly told. हाँ तो plainly telling ये ही बंगाली ट्रांसलेटर के द्वारा नहीं होगा. Apart from अरे क्या हो गया इसको? हाँ, apart from the splendid merits of the एक मिनट सब कुछ स्लो हो गया है. पकड़ ही नहीं पा रहा हूँ गूगल क्रोम को. हाँ. Apart from the splendid merits of the subject matter dealt with in the war-lit pages of this history of the Indian War of Independence of 1857, the story of the thrilling vicissitudes though through which this book had to pass does by itself entitle it to be placed on the classical shelf in any world library. The object and the name of this book. Veer Savarkarji, okay, so this section is not written by him. Veer Savarkarji, the famous author of this book. No, let's skip this portion. I have read this portion. This portion is not that important. Let's start from the chapters. G.M. Joshi. Okay, author's introduction now. Indian War of Independence. So this is Veer Savarkar's writing himself, okay? 50 years having passed by, the circumstances having changed, and the prominent actors on both sides being no more, the account of the War of 1857 has crossed the limits of current politics and can be relegated to the realms of history. When therefore, taking the searching attitude of an historian, I began to scan that instructive and magnificent spectacle, I found to my great surprise the brilliance of a war of independence shining in the quote unquote mutiny of 1857. The spirits of the dead seemed hallowed by martyrdom, and out of the heap of ashes appeared forth sparks of a fiery inspiration. Aha, क्या क्या लिखने का style है. This is what I'm saying. So even if everything he's saying is wrong, which is factually they are not wrong, even if the narrative is wrong, even if the conclusions are wrong, even then it's still beautiful to see the evolution of a man. I thought that my countrymen will be most agreeably disappointed, even as I was, at this deep buried spectacle in one of the most neglected corners of our history, if I could but show this to them by the light of research. So I try to do the same and am able today to present to my Indian readers this startling but faithful picture of the great events of 1857. The nation that has no consciousness of its past has no future. Equally true it is that a nation must develop its capacity not only of claiming a past, but also of knowing how to use it for the furtherance of its future. This is what I'm saying. Revolt of 1857 is not going to be stopped teaching in our schools anytime soon. So if they're going to teach it anyway, why not teach it this way with this man's writing? The nation ought to be the master and not the slave of its own history, because it is absolutely unwise to try to do certain things now irrespective of special considerations, simply because they had been once acted in the past. The feeling of hatred against the Mohammedans was just and necessary in the times of Shivaji, but such a feeling would be unjust and foolish if nursed now, simply because it was the dominant feeling of the Hindus then. As almost all authorities on which this work is based are English authors for whom it must have been impossible to paint the account of the other side as elaborately and as faithfully as they have done their own, it is perfectly possible that many a scene other than what this book contains might have been left unstated, and many a scene described in this book might be found to have been wrongly described. But if some patriotic historian would go to northern India and try to collect the traditions from the very mouths of those who witnessed and perhaps took a leading part in the war, the opportunity of knowing the exact account of this can still be caught, though unfortunately it will be impossible to do so before very long. When within a decade or two the whole generation of those who took part in that war shall have passed away never to return, not only would it be impossible to have the pleasures of seeing the actors themselves, but the history of their actions will have to be left permanently incomplete. Will any patriotic historian undertake to prevent this while it is not yet too late? Even the slightest references and the most minute details in this book can be as much substantiated by authoritative works as the important events and the main currents of the history. Before laying down this pen, the only desire I want to express is that such a patriotic and yet faithful, a more detailed and yet coherent history of 1857 may come forward in the nearest future from an Indian pen, so that this my humble writing may soon be forgotten. Oh, क्या लिखा है कि आशा है कि फ्यूचर में कोई इतना बेटर बुक लिख देगा कि मेरा बुक लोग भूल जाएंगे. Okay, part 1, first chapter. Swadharma and Swaraj, what are they? It is a simple truism. Truism matlab things which we just consider to be true or correct or just to be a daily fact even without giving it much thought. It is a simple truism patent even to the uneducated, that the most tiny house cannot be built without a foundation strong enough to support its weight. Everyone knows this. When writers who profess to write the history of the revolution that was enacted in India in 1857 ignored this common sense principle and do not try to discuss the real causes that led to it, and impudently maintain that the vast edifice of the revolution was built on a blade of straw, they must either be fools or, what is more probable, knaves, meaning naive people or idiots. Anyway, it is certain that they are unfit for the holy work of the historian. इतिहासकार का जो काम होता है वो उनसे नहीं हो पाएगा. In all great religious and political revolutions, it is almost impossible to connect together links apparently inconsistent, जो कि दूर से देख के लगता है inconsistent है, disconnected है, without thoroughly understanding the principles which are at their roots. This is one again fundamental problem with ICSE boards history writing, that everything seems random, that okay, one war of independence here, one revolutionary randomly here, okay, Sri Aurobindo was a random revolutionary, threw a bomb here and there, then became a saint. But what Sanjeev Sanyal points out later on, and now with his book Revolutionaries, is that all these people knew each other. It was a more or less a coordinated effort, that yeah, okay, you are doing that, yeah, I'm doing this here. On seeing a great work of machinery composed of innumerable screws and wheels doing work of tremendous magnitude, if we do not understand how the power is produced, we may feel bewildering astonishment, aha, but never the inner pleasure due to knowledge of फिजिक्स के मैकेनिकल इंजीनियरिंग का एग्जांपल दिया जा रहा है कि जैसे कि एक मशीन का हम फंक्शनिंग हमको नहीं समझ में आता है, हमको लगता है कि कितना अच्छा परफॉर्म कर रहा है मशीन, मगर उसके अंदर क्या क्या मैकेनिज्म है वो हमको दिख नहीं रहा है. When writers describe such stirring events as the French Revolution or the religious revolution of Holland, meaning Netherlands, the very splendor and magnitude of the crises they paint often dazzle and confuse their mind's eye, and they rarely gather sufficient coolness, meaning calmness, and courage to go deep into the underlying principles. But without an exposition of the hidden causes and the mysterious forces that worked beneath, the essence of a revolution can never be made plain. And therefore, it is that history attaches more importance to the exposition of principles than to mere narrative. While searching after principles, historians often commit another mistake. For every act, there are various causes. I loved this sentence. Listen to this sentence. This what a phenomenal researcher and scholar Veer Savarkar was. You will understand from this sentence. Okay, nuance, जो कि कॉमन मासेस में बहुत प्रॉब्लम है. कॉमीज में, पत्थरबाजों में, हिंदुत्व साइड में नुआंस ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लोगों को पसंद नहीं होता है. नुआंसेस का धैर्य बहुत कम लोगों में ही होता है. कॉमी और पत्थरबाज में तो किसी से भी नहीं होता है, नहीं तो वो कम्युनिस्ट और पत्थरबाज होते ही नहीं. मगर हमारे साइड में भी ये प्रॉब्लम थोड़ा बहुत है ही. मगर वीर सावरकर का कितना इंटेलिजेंस था और माइंड और ब्रेन पावर था नुआंस ऑब्जर्व करने का, वो तुमको इस सेंटेंस में दिखने को मिलेगा. देखो, for every act, there are various causes, direct and indirect, general and particular, accidental and necessary. So apparently, one could argue that Veer Savarkar was a chaos theory or a complexity theory guy, because let me tell you, Sanjeev Sanyal has read Veer Savarkar, and Sanjeev Sanyal thinks of the world exactly like this: that there are always uncountable, infinite numbers of unintended causes of things. You don't operate your government or even your life like as if everything is planned out, everything will go according to your plan. It won't. Like Sanjeev Sanyal, whenever bringing up this topic, gives one example that in 1820s, or whenever the vehicles were discovered, cars were discovered, just before that there was a big economic conference of all the first world countries of those days, meaning the European countries and USA. They gathered in USA to discuss the most pressing problem of their era, which was the amount of cow dung in London. Okay, because all horse carriages were being going around in London. So their problem, their fear was that forecasts were given by all the biggest economists that in 40 to 50 years London will be 6 feet deep under cow dung, I mean horse dung. Okay, तो उसके बाद क्या होगा, उसके लिए सरकार को कुछ करना चाहिए. And few days later, car gets invented and horse carriages go out of fashion. So in that very vibe, okay, For every act, there are various causes: direct causes, indirect causes, general causes, particular causes, accidental causes, necessary causes. In their proper classification lies the true skill of the historian. Okay, कौन सा कॉज किस जॉनरा का कॉज है, किस टाइप का कॉज है, कौन सा कॉज जनरल कॉज है, कौन सा कॉज डायरेक्ट कॉज है, कौन सा कॉज इनडायरेक्ट कॉज है, ये क्लासिफिकेशन करना is the true skill of the historian. This is what Veer Savarkar is saying, and that is why I'm saying, regardless of what the conclusion of the book is, for these reasons this book absolutely needs to be read and taught, and even to kids. In this process of classification, many historians get mixed up and make the accidental into the necessary cause. This is so true. The accidental cause is mistaken to be the necessary cause. They make themselves as ridiculous as the judge in the story who, in a cause of arson, meaning aag laga dena, put all the responsibility on the match, okay, instead of on the man who struck it. The real importance of any event can never be understood by this confusion of causes. Okay, कौन सा cause किस तरह का cause है वो दिमाग में रखना बहुत जरूरी है. Not merely that many, not merely that, but mankind begins positively to curse the memory of men who are represented as having started with a light heart and private selfish motives, a revolution in the course of which countless lives are lost and immense expanses of country devastated. And therefore, in writing the history of any event in general and of revolutionary movements in particular, a writer cannot give a true idea of them by means of simple description or even by tracing them backwards to accidental causes. An upright and impartial historian must try to discover the foundations on which the revolutionary structure was erected. He must try to discover and discuss fundamental causes. Let me have a sip of coffee and see a bit of comments. দাদা সময় পেলে নীরজজি তন্ময় কেলকারের ভিডিওটার উপর রিঅ্যাকশন দিই. ইয়েস আজকে টাইম পেলে. ভাইয়া, do you know this book was published in Holland because they couldn't in Bharat or Britain? Oh, acha. Bhaiya, please someday try my transportation for life and oh, I see. Yeah. How big is it? Big is that book? Gandhi Gonda in Marathi, written by Savarkar. मैं गोलियों को लानत use. Okay. Immense extra. Mazzini, in a critical article on Carlyle's French Revolution, has said that every revolution must have had a fundamental principle. Revolution is a complete rearrangement in the life of a historic man. A revolutionary movement cannot be based on a flimsy and momentary grievance. It is always due to some all moving principle for which hundreds and thousands of men fight, before which thrones totter, crowns are destroyed and created, existing ideals are shattered and new ideals break forth, and for the sake of which vast masses of people think lightly of shedding sacred human blood. The moving spirits of revolutions are deemed holy or unholy in proportion as the principle underlying them is beneficial or wicked. As in private life, so also in history, the deeds of an individual or a nation are judged by the character of the motive. If we forget this test, we cannot appreciate the vast difference between the empire building wars of Alexander and Italy's fight for liberty under Garibaldi. Just as to decide about the merits of these two different events, one has to consider the prime motive of the chief actors in those wars. So also to write a full history of a revolution means necessarily the tracing of all events of that revolution back to their source, the motive, the innermost desire of those who brought it about. This is the telescope which will show clearly the lights and shadows obscured by the blurred presentation of partial and prejudiced historians. When a beginning is made in this manner, order appears in the apparent chaos of inconsistent facts. Crooked lines become straight, and straight lines appear crooked. Light appears where darkness is, and darkness spreads over light. What appeared ugly becomes fair, and what looked beautiful is seen to be deformed. क्या writing skill है. Oof. And expectedly or unexpectedly, देखो nuance. And expectedly or unexpectedly, but in a clear form, the revolution comes into the light of real history. Commies don't know what they're missing out on by not reading Veer Savarkar. The history of the tremendous revolution that was enacted in India in the year 1857 has never been written in this scientific spirit by any author, Indian or foreign, and hence there are current throughout the world most extraordinary, misleading, and unjust ideas about that revolutionary war. English authors have committed in this respect all the faults noted above. Some of them have not made any attempt beyond merely describing the events, but most of them have written the history in a wicked and partial spirit. Their prejudiced eye could not or would not see the root principle of that revolution. Is it possible? Can any sane man maintain that all-embracing revolution could have taken place without a principle to move it? Could that vast tidal wave from Peshawar to Calcutta have risen in flood without a fixed intent of drowning something by means of its force? Could it be possible the sieges of Delhi, the massacre of Kanpur, the banner of the empire, heroes dying for it? Could it ever be possible that such noble and inspiring deeds have happened without a noble and inspiring end? Even a small village market does not take place without an end, a motive. How then can we believe that great market opened and closed without any purpose? The great market whose shops were on every battlefield from Peshawar to Calcutta, where kingdoms and empires were being exchanged, and where the only current coin was blood. No, no, the market was neither opened nor closed without a purpose. English historians have always ignored this point, not because it is difficult to ascertain it, but because it is against their interests to admit the truth. Even more deceptive than this indifference, and one which changes or distorts the whole spirit of the revolution of 1857, is the other device of English historians copied by their Indian sycophants. The device, namely, of describing the rumor as to the वो greased cartridges as the moving cause of the revolution, जो कि मंगल पांडे फिल्म में भी दिखाया गया था. An Indian writer drawing inspiration from English history and English money says, quote, foolish people went mad simply at the rumor that cartridges were greased with cows and pigs' fat. Did anyone inquire as to whether the report was true? One man said and another believed. Because the second became disaffected, a third joined him, and so, like a procession of blind men, a company of inconsiderate fools arose, and rebellion broke out. End quote. We purpose to discuss later on whether people blindly believed the rumor about cartridges, but it will be plain to anyone who has read even the English historians closely and thought about the matter that a great attempt has been made to father all the responsibility of the revolution on this one rumor. It is not surprising that to one uh, that to one who thinks that a mighty rising like that of 1857 can be produced by such trifles. It was only a quote unquote company of inconsiderate fools. If the revolution had been due only to the cartridges, why did Nana Sahib, the Emperor of Delhi, the Queen of Jhansi, and Khan Bahadur Khan of Rohilkhand join it? These were not surely going to serve in the English army, nor were they compelled to break the cartridges with their teeth. If the rising were due wholly or chiefly to the cartridges, it would have stopped suddenly as soon as the English Governor General issued a proclamation that they should not be used anymore. He gave them permission to make cartridges with their own hand. But instead of doing so, or ending the whole by leaving the company's service altogether, the sepoys rose to fight in battle. Not only the sepoys, but thousands of peaceful citizens and rajas and maharajas also rose, who had no direct or indirect connection with the army. It is therefore clear that it was not these accidental things that roused the spirit of the sepoy and the civilian, king and pauper, meaning bhikari, and Hindu and Mohammedan. Now, just to play devil's advocate, at this point, based on the things you all are discussing in the comment section, one could argue that Veer Savarkar was just being naive here, and they were all these people who Savarkar is saying that if they did not have to break those cartridges with their mouths personally because they were such big kings, why did they join the revolution? So Savarkar was being naive because they were joining because they wanted their kingship back. Okay. Now I think another way it could be argued in favor of this version of Savarkar is that what Savarkar is actually pointing out here is that also is important because um, all these people were then uniting and rising up against one particular villain. That I think should not be ignored. A very significant outgroup was being concluded upon. There was a consensus was being arrived upon कि ये outgroup है. That is still an important thing. So before that, every time there was a call for unity, someone else was betraying. At this point, someone at least, some people at least thought of being having an united front and diagnosing one out group and kicking them out. So it's still some sort of an important event, I think. Equally misleading is the theory that the rising was due to the annexation of Awadh. How many were fighting, taking their lives in their hands, that had no interest whatsoever in the Awadh dynasty? Then what was their motive in fighting? Nawab of Awadh himself was imprisoned in the fort of Calcutta, Fort William, and according to the English historians, his subjects were very much disaffected under his regime. Then why did Talukdar's soldiers and almost every one of his subjects unsheath their swords for him? A Hindu of Bengal, a quote unquote Hindu of Bengal, wrote an essay in England at that time about the revolution. In it, the Hindu says, quote, "You have idea how many simple and kind-hearted people who had never seen the Nawab, nor were ever again likely to see, wept in their huts when the sorrows of the Nawab were being related before them." This is my point. Being related before them. And you do not also know how many soldiers were daily taking an oath after the tears had flown to avenge this insult on Wajid Ali Shah, as if a calamity had fallen on themselves in person. End quote. Why did the sepoys feel this sympathy with the Nawab, and why did eyes which had never seen the Nawab glisten with tears? It is plain, therefore, that the revolution did not break out simply on account of the annexation of Awadh. The argument is, I think, fair enough. The fear of greased cartridges and the annexation of Awadh were only temporary and accidental causes. To turn these to real causes would never help us in understanding the real spirit of the revolution. If we were to take them as the real moving causes, it would mean that without these, the revolution would not have taken place. That without the rumor of greased cartridges and without the annexation of Awadh, the revolution would not have been there. It would be impossible to find a theory more foolish and more deceptive. If there had been no fear of the cartridges, the principle which was underlying that fear would have cropped up in some other form and produced a revolution just the same. Even if Awadh had not been annexed, the principle of annexation would have manifested itself in the destruction of some other kingdom. The real causes of the French Revolution were not simply the high prices of grain, the Bastille, the kings leaving Paris, or the feasts. These might explain some incidents of the revolution, but not the revolution as a whole. The kidnapping of Sita was only the incidental cause of the fight between Rama and Ravana. The real causes were deeper and more inward. What then were the real causes and motives of this revolution? What were what were they that could make thousands of heroes unsheath their swords and flash them on the battlefield? What were they that had the power to brighten up pale and rusty crowns and raise from the dust abased flags? क्या लिखने का style है? What were they that for them many men by the thousands willingly poured their blood year after year? ये सब क्यों हो रहा था? What were they that Maulvis preached them, learned Brahmins blessed them, that for their success prayers went up to heaven from the mosques of Delhi and the temples of Banaras? These great principles were Swadharma and Swaraj. In the thundering roar of Deen Deen, which rose to protect religion, when there were evident signs of a cunning, dangerous, and destructive attack on religion dearer than life, and in the terrific blows dealt at the chain of slavery with the holy desire of acquiring Swaraj, when it was evident that chains of political slavery had been put around them, and their God given liberty wrested away by subtle tricks. In these two lies the root principle of the Revolutionary War. And this God given liberty thing kind of struck me because this is a very libertarian principle and also American conservative principle that these are your God given rights, God has made you free, etc. In what other history is the principle of love of one's religion and love of one's country manifested more nobly than in ours? However much foreign and partial historians might have tried to paint our glorious land in dark colors, so long as the name of Chittor has not been erased from the pages of our history, so long as the names of Pratapaditya and Guru Govind Singh are there, so long the principles of Swadharma and Swaraj will be embedded in the bone and marrow of all the sons of Hindustan. They might be darkened for a time by the mist of slavery. क्या क्या स्टाइल है, ओ माय गॉड. I think this should be taught in English literature classroom. History छोड़ो. They might be darkened for a time, but by the mist of slavery. कुछ कुछ समय के लिए the fog of slavery might darken it. Even the sun has its clouds. But very soon the strong light of these self-same principles pierces through the mist and chases it away. Never before were there such a number of causes for the universal spreading of these traditional and noble principles as there were in 1857. These particular reasons revived most wonderfully the slightly unconscious feelings of Hindustan, and the people began to prepare for the fight for Swadharma and Swaraj. In this proclamation of the establishment of Swaraj, the Emperor of Delhi says, O you sons of Hindustan, if we make up our mind, we can destroy the enemy in no time. We will destroy the enemy and will release from dread our religion and our country, dearer to us than life itself. अब कौन सा रिलीजन कौन सा कंट्री वही कंट्रोवर्सी है. What is holier in this world than such a revolutionary war? A war for the noble principles propounded in this sentence. Released from dread our religion and our country, dearer to us than life itself. The seed of the revolution of 1857 is in this holy and inspiring idea, clear and explicit, propounded from the throne of uh, propounded on the throne of Delhi, the protection of religion and country. In the proclamation issued at Bareilly, he says, Hindus and Mohammedans of India, अच्छा दोनों को ही बोला जा रहा है. Hindus and Mohammedans of India, arise, brethren, arise. Of all the gifts of God, the most gracious is that of Swaraj. Will the oppressive demon who has robbed us of it by deceit be able to keep it away from us forever? Can such an act against the will of God stand forever? No, no. The English have committed so many atrocities that the cup of their sins is already full. To add to it, they have got now the wicked desire to destroy our holy religion. Are you going to remain idle even now? God does not wish that you should remain so, for He has inspired in the hearts of Hindus and Mohammedans the desire to turn the English out of our country. One outgroup has been diagnosed, and by the grace of God and your valor, they will soon be so completely defeated that in this our Hindustan there will not remain even the least trace of them. In this our army, the differences of small and great shall be forgotten, and equality shall be the rule. For all who draw the sword in this holy war for the defense of religion are equally glorious. They are brethren, there is no rank among them. Therefore, I again say to all my Hindu brethren, arise and jump into the battlefield for this divinely ordained and supreme duty. End quote. The man who, after seeing such magnificent utterances by the revolutionary leaders, does not understand its principles is, as we said, either a fool or a knave. What stronger evidence is needed to prove that Indian warriors drew their swords at the time for Swadharm and Swaraj, feeling it the duty of every man to fight for the rights given to man by God? These proclamations issued at different times and places during the war make it unnecessary to dilate more on its principles. These proclamations were not issued by non-entities, but they were orders issued from adorable and powerful thrones. They were burning expressions of the agitated feelings of the time. In these, the real heart of the nation had spoken out. When at the time of war, there was no occasion to conceal real sentiments through pressure or fear. This tremendous heroic shout, Swadharma and Swaraj, proclaims to the world the character of the revolution, in which, quote unquote, all who draw the sword are equally glorious. But were these two principles understood as different and exclusive of each other? Good question. According to, of course, Sri Aurobindo, that they are one and the same. Sanatan Dharma is our nationalism. At least Orientals have never had the idea that Swadharma and Swaraj had no connection with each other. The Eastern mind has maintained a full and traditional belief, as is also said by Mazzini, that there is no vast barrier between heaven and earth, but that the two, that heaven and earth are ends of one and the same thing. Our idea of Swadharma too is not contradictory to that of Swaraj. The two are connected as means and end. Okay, one is means and one is end. So Swadharma is means and Swaraj is end. Swaraj without Swadharma is despicable, and Swadharma without Swaraj is powerless. What a line. ये सब किसी ने नहीं पढ़ा, सिर्फ गाली दे गए, सिर्फ बदनाम करते गए, कोई नहीं पढ़ा ये सब. सीताराम गोयल, क्या क्या राइटिंग स्किल है, क्या रिसर्च स्किल है, कोई पढ़ा नहीं, कोई नाम नहीं सुना, किसी को पता ही नहीं कि इतना अच्छा लिखते थे. These really make me so sad and pissed off at the same time. What a line. Swaraj without Swadharm is despicable, and Swadharm without Swaraj is powerless. The sword of material power, Swaraj, should always be should always be ready drawn for our object and our safety in the other world, Swadharm. This trend of the Eastern mind will be often found in its history. The reason why in the East all revolutions take a religious form, nay more the reason why Eastern history knows of no revolutions unconnected with religion, lies in the all-embracing meaning that the word dharma has. That this dual principle of Swadharma and Swaraj, always seen in the history of India, appeared also in the revolution of 1857, should be a matter of no surprise. We have already referred to the first proclamation of the Emperor of Delhi. Afterwards, when Delhi was besieged by the English and the war was at its height, the Emperor issued another proclamation addressing all Indians thus, quote, "Why has God given us wealth, land, and power? They are not for individual pleasure, but they are given for the holy object of defense of our religion. But where are now the means to attain this holy land? As said in the proclamation given, where is the gift of Swaraj, the greatest of all the gifts of God? Where is wealth? Where is land? Where is power? In the plague of slavery, all this divine independence is all but dead. In the above proclamation, in order to show how the plague of slavery was destroying India, full descriptions are given as to how the kingdoms of Nagpur, Ayodhya, and Jhansi were trampled down into dust, and it awakens the people to the fact that they are guilty of the sin of destroying religion in the house of God, having lost these means of defending religion. The command of God is obtain Swaraj, for that is the chief key to the protection of dharma. He who does not attempt to acquire Swaraj, he who sits silent in slavery, he is an atheist and hater of religion. Therefore, rise for Swadharma and acquire Swaraj. This reminds me that so many of Bengal's deeply religious people are so starkly anti BJP and pro Trinamool. I was reading I was checking out the Facebook profile of a Shakta Sadhaka, a guy younger than me, a few days back from Kolkata. He has even written a book on Shaktism. And then I saw he was glorifying LGBTQ people in sharing a meme that, see, Bengalis used to be so strong, pictures of Gopal Pathanetaji, etc. And then below that famous picture of so many Bengali guys wearing sari. And he shares that with the caption that, yes, and both these groups of men had the courage to stand up against the social norms. That's the kind of devout Hindus we have in Kolkata. Rise for Swadharma and acquire Swaraj. What divine events in the history of India are due to the realization of this principle? The poet Saint Ramdas gave the same dictum to the Marathas 250 years ago. Die for your dharma. Kill the enemies of your dharma while you are dying. In this way, fight and kill and take back your kingdom. There are actually two poems on Chhatrapati Shivaji by Rabindranath Thakur. So one of them is the one I have discussed from my channel. The other one, in that poem, I have seen that it's about mainly about Ramdas and Ramdas's relationship with Chhatrapati Shivaji. This alone is the principle in the Revolutionary War of 1857. This is its mental science, the true and only telescope which will show it in its true and clear form is the above verse of Ramdas. Seeing at it through this telescope, what a spectacle comes into view! The war fought for Swadharma and Swaraj does not lose its luster by defeat. The splendor of Guru Gobind Singh's life is none the less because his efforts did not immediately succeed at the time. So just because he did not get success at that time does not mean that Guru Gobind Singh's contributions are any less or his efforts are any less. Nor do we think the less of the rising of 1848 in Italy because the revolution failed completely at that time. Justin McCarthy says, the fact was that throughout the greater part of the northern and northwestern provinces of the Indian peninsula, there was a rebellion of the native races against the English power. It was not the sepoy alone who rose in revolt. It was not by any means a merely military mutiny. It was a combination of military grievance, national hatred, and religious fanaticism against the English occupation of India. The native princes and the native soldiers were in it. The Mohammedan and the Hindu forgot their old religious antipathies to join against the Christian. Hatred and panic were the stimulants of that great rebellious movement. The quarrel about the greased cartridges was but the chance spark flung in among all the combustible material. If that spark had not lighted it, some other would have done the work. The immediate sepoys found in a moment a leader, a flag, and a cause, and the mutiny was transformed into a revolutionary war. When they reached the Jamuna, glittering in the morning light, they had all unconsciously seized one of the great critical moments of history and converted a military mutiny into a national and religious war. Charles Ball writes, at length the torrent overflowed the banks and saturated the moral soil of India. It was then expected that those waves would overwhelm and destroy the entire European element, and that when the torrent of rebellion should again confine itself within bounds, patriotic India, freed from its alien rulers, would bow only to the independent scepter of a native prince. The movement now assumed a more important aspect. It became the rebellion of a whole people incited to outrage by resentment for imaginary wrongs and sustained in their delusions by hatred and fanaticism. White writes in his complete history of the Great Sepoy War that I should be lacking in faithfulness as an historian if I fail to record with admiration the courage displayed by the Awadhians. The great fault of the Awadh Talukdars from a moral point of view was their having made a common cause with the murderous mutineers. But for this they might have been regarded as noble patriots, fighting in a good cause, pro regit, pro patria for the king and the motherland, for Swaraj and Swadesh. Okay, now the second chapter is starting. Before that, let me check some comments and have a sip of coffee. अब असली लिखने का और भी हम skill देखेंगे अभी. Well, Dada Savarkar refuted the communist revolution long back. Why are they unsuccessful in bringing in a revolution? Because there is no religion in it. मैंने ऑलरेडी अपने आधे क्लास को वीर सावरकर का एडमायर बना दिया है, इंक्लूडिंग आपने नाना को गिफ्ट किया और अपने अपने नाना को, अच्छा, और अपने दोस्त को धनंजय कीर वाली बुक प्लस मैग्नम ओपस. अरे बेंचो, why always standing up against the social norms is good. They are norms for a reason. Very good point. This is my, yeah, I like that. That's how I also think. मुझे बंगाली हिंदूज बहुत होती है लगते हैं, सीरियसली नॉट अभय निरंजन. या कोलकाता इज द मेन प्रॉब्लम. The chain of causes. Have you read Mahabharat by Rajshekhar Bosu? If yes, how? No, I have not read Mahabharat. I have only read Chheleder Ramayan by Upendra Kishore. The chain of causes. If it is true that the question whether India, bounded by the Himalayas on the north and the ocean on the south, should be completely independent or not, was being solved on the battlefields of the War of 1857, then the chain of causes begins from the day in 1757 when the question was first raised. Okay? The question being that whether India, bounded by Himalayas in the north, should be completely independent or not. That question was first raised in 1757, according to Savarkar, because in 1757 the British rule started. On the 23rd of June in 1757, the question whether India should belong to the Indians or to the English was openly discussed for the first time on the field of Plassey. It's not actually pronounced Plassey in Bengali, it's Polashi, okay? So I will just pronounce it as Polashi. Yeah, this is a British pronunciation. On that very day and on that very field, where it was first discussed, were sown the seeds of the revolution. If Polashi had not been there, the war of 1857 also would not have taken place. Though a century had rolled by, the memory of that day was fresh in the heart of Hindustan. In proof of this, witness the terrible scene on the 23rd day of June 1857 in northern India, in the vast country from Punjab up to Calcutta. Wherever there was an open field, thousands of revolutionaries were fighting the English simultaneously in different places from morning till evening, after openly challenging them, saying, "Today we are going to avenge Polashi." When on the battlefield of Polashi, India had sworn to fight a war of freedom, England was, as it were, anxious to hasten the day of its fulfillment as much as possible. because Englishmen did not rest with sowing the seeds of the Revolutionary War at Palashi, but they made enormous efforts to encourage the growth of the plant all over India. Warren Hastings tended there's a famous school in Kolkata even today called Multipurpose School. That school was basically the living residence of Warren Hastings. And just beside that, the main uh, room where he used to live, that's a haunted house apparently. That building is still there. It's called the Hastings House. Warren Hastings tended the plant in Banaras, Rohilkhand, and Bengal. Wellesley did the same in the fertile fields of Mysore, Asai, Pune, Satara, and northern India. This was not done without strong efforts, for the ground had to be ploughed, not with ordinary ploughs, but with swords and guns. What would ordinary ploughs avail against Shanwar Palace, the heights of Sahyadri, the fort of Agra, and the throne of Delhi? When these rocky portions had been broken and crushed, the smaller pieces left out by mistake were also next broken. The smaller princes fell under the strokes of English perfidy, oppression, and tyranny. The English did not even feed well or pat on the back the brutes by whose strength they effected all these conquests with the brown sepoys. For 100 years they had been oppressing and maltreating the sepoys in their army. When the soldiers of the Marathas or the Nizam won important victories, they used to get jagirs and rewards. But the East India Company, gave nothing but sweet words of praise. The sepoys whose swords won India for the English were so barbarously treated that General Arthur Wellesley would drive the wounded sepoys to the mouth of guns, euthanize them by killing them by guns, instead of sending them to the hospital. While the English had thus been sowing the seeds of the discontent and hatred in almost all parts of Hindustan, the time soon came when it appeared that their efforts would soon be crowned with success. The danger to the independence of India was first perceived by Nana Fadnavis of Pune and Hyder Sahib of Mysore. From that day onwards, the presence of this danger began to be seen, faintly at least, by the princes of India, and its effect was markedly seen in the quote unquote mutiny at Vellore. This rising at Vellore was a rehearsal of the Great Rising of 1857. Just as in a theatre, before the actual performance, several rehearsals have to be gone through, so in history, before the actual and final attainment of freedom, in order to harmonize the whole performance, several rehearsals in the shape of risings are necessary. In Italy, the rehearsal started as early as 1821, and only in 1861 was the play successful. The rising at Vellore in 1806 was such a rehearsal on a small scale. In this rising, the sepoys had been won over by the princes and people. At markets, preachers disguised as fakirs were preaching to indicate the time of rising. Chapatis had been distributed. Hindus and Mohammedans together had risen in the name of religion and liberty. But this being the first rehearsal, they fell even as they were rising. Never mind, before the final performance, how many rehearsals have to be gone through? Only the actors should boldly stick to their task and never cease their rehearsals. And for producing this drama, both England and India were working day and night without rest, and those that were making ready to take part in the play were not common, poor, or ignorant folk. The Gadi of Tanjore, the Masnad of Mysore, the Raigad of Sahyadri, the Diwani Khas of Delhi were among the select actors. And to crown it, Lord Dalhousie landed on the shores of Hindustan in 1846. There is not now much time left for commencing the task which was sworn to on the Battle of Palashi. Now, now he's going to mention some horrific things done by Lord Dalhousie, but remember, Dalhousie is a very famous place and street name in Kolkata even today. From the above chain of causes, it will be clearly seen that before Dalhousie landed in India, the seeds of discontent had gone deep, very deep, all over Hindustan. Rajas and Maharajas, deprived of their kingdoms by the English, were burning in their hearts. The fact that the centenary of Polashi was approaching inspired a very strange feeling of hope among the people. And in the very armies of the English, the sepoys were secretly chafing with rage and hatred. Even if India had at this time a viceroy who would strive to allay this secret discontent, it is very doubtful how far his efforts would have been successful. He's saying that even if someone nice came, even then the revolt was bound to happen. The question now was not whether the company's rule should be good or bad, but only question that used to be asked all over the country was whether the rule should exist at all. The one other force that was necessary for making an attempt to solve definitely this question was supplied when Dalhousie became viceroy, because he gave up the policy of coating poison pills with sugar before administering them to the victim and began a system of open and direct oppression which did not fail to burn its way into the hearts of the masses. Lord Dalhousie is described by English historians as one of the founders of the English Empire. This fact alone is sufficient to form an estimate of his capacity and character. In a country where unjust wars of conquest and oppression of foreign nationalities and races are universally popular, it is no wonder that those who have committed the greatest injustice and oppression are the most honored. Okay? Interesting that you see, up until now, one could have mistaken him for a random secular guy who was just very naive and cute and did not know anything about Islamic history or the history of Islamic invaders. See this sentence. This sentence shows that he was aware of those as well. Okay, he's saying that in a country where we always end up celebrating foreign nationals and foreign invaders, it's no surprise that even Dalhousie got celebrated. So he's talking about Islamic invaders as well. Interesting. In a country where unjust wars of conquest, okay, so he's hinting at Islamic invaders, calling their actions unjust wars of conquest and oppression of foreign nationalities and races, okay, are universally popular. It is no wonder that those who have committed the greatest injustice and oppression are the most honored. Thus, he who is most unjust is deemed the most capable, and one has no better way of proving himself a great man in such a country than by committing a climax of injustice. In such an empire, where there is an where there is such an emulation of injustice and oppression, Lord Dalhousie was given the significant title of a quote unquote founder. It is impossible to find a more suitable word to describe his uh, character. With the result of 100 years of wicked English policy behind him, obstinate by nature, possessed of boundless self confidence, his flesh and blood permeated by the glory and pride of an unjust empire, this bold, if not clever man landed on the shores of our land, saying openly, I will level the land of Hindustan. Level meaning तोड़ फोड़ के एकदम flat बना दूंगा. As soon as Dalhousie landed, he saw at once that so long as Ranjit Singh's lions lived in Punjab, it was impossible to achieve the object, dear to his heart, of levelling Hindustan. He therefore determined to throw somehow or other the lion of Punjab in the cage of slavery. But Punjab lion had no ordinary claws. Seeing his cave threatened, he rushed out of the lair at Chilianwala and with a terrible stroke of his paw mauled the enemy and made him bleed. But alas, while the lion was standing at the mouth of the cave at Chilianwala, a traitor broke open the back wall at Gujarat and the lion was surprised and captured. Soon the cave of the lion became his cage. Soon the cave of the lion became his cage. Ranjit's queen, Chand Kuvar, died rotting in London, and the lion's cub, the Lip Singh, ate the beggar's bread at the hands of the Firangi army. After the annexation of Punjab, Lord Dalhousie wrote in his dispatch, the proud sentence and the extent of the British Empire was now continuous from the Himalayas to Cape Comorin. But now that the British frontiers had been pushed to the Himalayas on the north and to the seas on the south, it was inevitable that he should have an ambition to create an eastern and a western frontier suitable to these northern and southern ones. Then why delay? Send a quote unquote peace mission to Burma and the work is done. This so called peace mission so tightly embraced the peace of Burma that its ribs were broken and it expired. Okay? ऐसा peace दिया कि उसका rib cage टूट गया. This very loving task was soon over and Burma was also annexed. Veer Savarkar being sarcastic here. Now, at last, the whole of Hindustan, from the Himalayas to Rameshwar and from Sindhu to Irrawaddy, became red. But oh, Dalhousie, do you not fear that it will soon be redder still? Do we realize what is meant by the annexation of Punjab and Burma? We cannot form an idea of it from mere names. The Punjab alone is a territory of 50,000 square miles and a population of 4 millions, 1909. It is a land watered by the 5 sacred rivers of the Vedas. on the banks of which the rishis in ancient times had recited sacred mantras. To conquer such a region, Alexander came from Greece. To defend such a region, King Porus fought. After taking such a country, the ambition even of Ravana would have been satisfied. But the land hunger of Dalhousie was not satisfied even after swallowing not only Punjab but also the extensive dominion of Burma. Though the frontiers of India were extended, there still remained the graves of ancient kingdoms within. Dalhousie therefore began to root these out and level everything. Not only did they occupy too much valuable space, but there was the fear that from these graves might one day rise the future avengers of India's wrongs. In the grave at Satara was buried a magnificent Hindu empire. And it is no wonder that Dalhousie, who was a believer in the resurrection of Jesus, was afraid that out of Satara might rise a future Hindu emperor who would confound the foreigner and establish Swaraj. Again, Veer Savarkar was trolling a bit. In April 1848, Appa Sahib, the Maharaja of Satara, died. At this news, Dalhousie decided to annex that state. And what was the reason? The king had no direct heirs, descendants. Even the cottage of the village laborer who has no direct descendant is not confiscated just because but is given to his adopted son or to his near relatives. And Satara was not a peasant's cottage but an quote unquote ally of the English government. In the year 1839, Pratap Singh Chhatrapati had been charged with having engaged in a conspiracy with the object of overthrowing the British government, was dethroned, and in his place Chhatrapati Appa Sahib was appointed by the English सरकार to succeed him. तो जिस आदमी का बारे में बात हो रहा है कि उसका बेटा नहीं था इसलिए उसको भगा दिया, उसको बिठाया था खुद ब्रिटिश ने. Mr. Arnold, in his book Dalhousie's Administration, says, "It is not pleasant to dwell on the circumstances of the dethronement, so discreditable as they were. After such shamelessly discreditable dethronement, the English establishment on the Gadi of Satara, the brother, on account of the failure of legitimate sons. By this, the English practically acknowledged the right of the other relations, as is the invariable law laid down by the Hindu Shastras, to succeed to the throne. This was the Hindu law, that descendant will have to, and relative will get to the throne. The only truth about this whole affair is that Dalhousie, with the habitual treachery of his uh, nation, yeah, habitual treachery of his nation, meaning England, overrode this open acknowledgement knowingly and deliberately, because it was profitable to do so. No one could, under any pretext, say that the English, in any of the various treaties concluded with the various Rajas, had refused to acknowledge the right of adopted children to succeed to their adoptive parents' thrones. It's not that the British ever said that. In all treaties, British said that yes, descendant कोई भी मिले adopted है तो भी चलेगा, कोई problem नहीं है. They never said this beforehand. In 1825, the company, while acknowledging the right of the adopted child of the Raja of Kota to succeed, openly declared that quote, the Prince of Kota must be considered to possess the right, in common with all other Hindus, of adopting a son and successor in conformity with the rules of the Shastras. End quote. Again, in 1837, when the Raja of Urcha adopted a successor, the English acknowledged him and promised Hindu sovereigns have a right to adopt to the exclusion of collateral heirs, and the British government is bound to acknowledge the adoption, provided it is regular and not in violation of the Hindu law. Okay, so the British had set the rule that adopted kids can get to the throne. Then they broke their own law, as they do today. The law is always for the law-abiding citizen. It may be safely asserted that nowhere else but in English politics could be found the audacity of denying the very existence of those promises which were given most definitely and which are contained in their own documents. Not only by these declarations but on innumerable other occasions, the English have acknowledged the right of the native princes to adopt in accordance with the Hindu Shastras. Suffice it to say that within the short period of 2 years, 46 to 47, the English government had consented to the succession of the Gadi of innumerable adopted sons and acknowledged their rights. Indeed, to try to seek in the language of promises and treaties the root cause of annexing these states is to work in a wrong direction altogether, so we are not going to look into that. Okay, promise किया था तब काहे नहीं दिया. The real truth of the matter is that Dalhousie had come to reduce all India to a dead level, and the grave of the Hindu empire at Satara was trying to raise its head. Obviously, therefore, though Pratap Singh and Appa Sahib had both adopted in accordance with the Hindu Shastras, the English annexed the Raj under the pretext of failure of legitimate heirs. इसको हमारा स्कूल में पढ़ाया जाता था ऐसी बोर्ड में कि डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ लैप्स, failure of legitimate heirs. The Gadi of Satara, the same Gadi Shivaji, how is it this pronounced, Gadi or Gadi? The same Gadi Shivaji was crowned on by the hand of Gaga Bhatt, the same Gadi to which Bajirao I dedicated all his triumph, before which he bowed low. I think Gadi. O Maharashtra, behold that same Gadi Shivaji sat on, and to which homage was paid by Santaji, Dhanaji, Niraji and Baji, has been broken to pieces by Dalhousie, जिसके नाम पे आज भी रोड है, एक बड़ा स्क्वायर है, डलहौसी स्क्वायर इन कलकत्ता. Go on, if you will, with your petitions and deputations. What if Dalhousie does not listen to these? In England, at least, do you think the directors will listen to you? Dalhousie is apparently a mere man, but who knows, perhaps the directors in England might be more than men. None in Maharashtra had seen these same gods. It was therefore thought proper that Rango Bapuji, an excellent and loyal man, should go to England to lay the grievances of Satara before the quote-unquote home authorities, meaning England's home ministry. Success or no success, the game was at least, they thought, worth trying. But how long would they wait, hoping against hope, for the success of their mission? For how long would Rango Bapuji go on wearing away the very pavement of go on wearing away the very pavement of Leadenhall Street? वहाँ पे फुटपाथ पे बैठ के धरना दिए जा रहे हैं, प्रोटेस्ट किए जा रहे हैं. Yes, Rango Bapuji will go on clinging to his impossible hope, till he is mocked at and insulted, till every penny is spent in feeing English barristers with crores of rupees, so that he has no money left even for his passage, and until he receives the insolent reply that they refuse to give back. Satara. क्या दिन थे, क्या सब struggle था. It is Gaddi as in, Gadi as in seat or throne, Gadi. D as in Dan, okay, Gadi. Dada, don't you think that criticisms done in humanities is done only to prove India as immoral people with no sense of morality? Yes. That is why I'm saying defund sociology. While Rango Bapuji was busy packing for London, Dalhousie's attention was being absorbed by a new affair, for an occasion had arisen by which he could weed out the miserable shrunken shrub of the British Raj of Nagpur. Raghoji Bhosle, the rightful owner of the Nagpur Gadi, died suddenly at the age of 47. The Raja of Berar was an ally of the English government, and this very friendship of the English was the cause of this destruction. Those who knew that the English hated them were spared, but all those who foolishly believed that the English were their friends were mercilessly and treacherously involved in ruin. The kingdom of the Berars was not the Englishman's Jagir, nor was it a feudatory state dependent for existence on his sweet will and pleasure. It was an independent state on an equality with Firangi Sarkar. J. Sylvian had defied the British government to show on what grounds and by what show of justice, either eastern or western, they could have the right of annexing such a British Raj, merely because the king died childless. Obviously, it was a game of legerdemain or sleight of hand. It was done like a trick. One removes and the other, his accomplice, conceals it quickly. While the one cuts off the head, the other, his accomplice, goes on asking loudly by what law he dared commit the deed, as if murderers and highway robbers need the law to back them up. Aha, this is my argument with gun rights. As if murderers and highway robbers need one more law that they are going to break anyway. In 1853, then, Dalhousie at last laid his murderous knife at the throat of his quote-unquote friend, showing as a reason that the Raja had not adopted a successor. Raja Raghoji had every hope of a child but died suddenly. Even if he died without a child, the right of adopting passed at his death to his legal wife. If the English had not acknowledged at any time previously by the heirs adopted by the queens of deceased Rajas, we should have had nothing to say.
But it remains a fact that the English had acknowledged the adoption by Daulat Rao Sindhia's widow in 1826, the adoption of Junkoji Sindhia's widow in 1836, the adoption by the widow of the Raja of Dhar in 1834, and the adoption by the Queen of Kishangarh in 1841. Not one, not two, but many such adoptions have the English acknowledged. But we should not forget the fact that on those occasions it was to their advantage to to acknowledge these heirs. In this case, on the other hand, it was not to their advantage to acknowledge the adoption by the widow of Raghoji. The real point at issue then was one of advantage to the English government, and everything was determined on that issue. While the Raj of Nagpur was annexed because no adoption took place, the Satara kingdom faced a similar fate because the adopted heir should not have a right to succeed to the throne. Impossible for logic to step here. By annexing Nagpur, Dalhousie robbed an extensive tract of 76,832 square miles with a population of 46,50,000 people and an enormous annual income. While the poor Ranis were weeping themselves hoarse. Okay, now listen to this part. While the poor Ranis were weeping themselves hoarse, a loud knock came on the palace gate. The door was opened and in rushed the English troops. Horses were let loose from the stables. Elephants, after forcibly pulling down the Ranis riding on them, were taken to the bazaars for sale, and silver and gold ornaments were removed from the palace and were sold by public auction in every street. The necklace that adorned the queen was lying in the dust of the bazaars. Elephants were sold for 100 rupees. After this, you will hardly be surprised to learn that horses, fed on richer food than Dalhousie had for his own dinners, were sold for 20 rupees, and that a pair of horses on which the Raja himself used to ride was sold for 5 rupees. Elephants with the howdahs on them and horses with their caparisons were sold, but the Rani still remained with their jewels. Why not sell the jewels? So the jewels also went the way of other things, and no Rani had a single jewel left on her person. But even here, the quote-unquote friendship of the English could not stop. So they began to dig the floor of the palace. And heavens, in the very bedroom of the Ranis, the Firangi's pickaxe began its desecrating work. Reader, startle not yet, not tremble, for the pickaxe has only started the work, and will do further deeds. Nay, is doing it. Because see you not, it has broken the bedstead of the queen, and is digging the very flooring underneath the bed. And shall we say it? All the while, the Maharani Annapurna Bai was on her deathbed, and was even then dying. While the dowager queen of the great family of the Bhosles of Nagpur was on her deathbed, groaning with agony and for the insult to the throne and the family, in the neighboring room, in that bed of the queen, the Firangi's pickaxe was doing its work. What a terrible accompaniment to the groans in the next room. And why all this? Because Raghoji died before adopting a successor. No, Harsh, I have not read Revolutionaries yet. Rani Annapurna Bai died groaning for the insufferable insults flung at her ancient dynasty. But the hope of Rani Banka to get justice from England was not yet dead. The vain hope was at last destroyed, but not until she had tried the immensely expensive remedy of fleeing English barristers with lakhs of rupees. And what did Rani Banka do then? She spent the rest of her life in loyal, quote-unquote, loyalty to the Firangi, while the lightning was working destruction at Jhansi. Banka, seeing that lightning meaning Rani Lakshmi Bai, okay. While the lightning was working destruction at Jhansi, Banka, seeing that her sons were ready to unsheath their words for Swaraj, threatened them that if they did unsheath their swords, she would herself inform the Firangis of their designs, meaning plans, and advise the Firangis to behead them. Behead them. This is how much this woman was an ally of British. She told her own sons not to join the Swaraj movement. Okay, new chapter is starting. The most phenomenal chapter in this sample. 59% of the sample is done. Now let me have a sip of coffee. Nana Sahib and Lakshmi Bai. Blow your trumpets loudly now. O heralds of history, because soon there are to arrive on the scene two great heroes. These are two bright pearls in the necklace of Mother India. Now, when dark night has overspread the horizon of the whole country, these two alone are shining as luminous stars. They are they are fiery Akalis ready to avenge their country's unjust wrongs with the last drop of their blood. They are two martyrs sacrificing their lives for country, religion, and freedom. They are two witnesses, sword in hand, to prove that the blood of Hindustan that gave birth to Shivaji is not dead yet. They are two noble souls that could entertain in their hearts the grand and holy ambition of Swaraj. They are two great crusaders in the holy war, glorious, glorious even in their defeat. Therefore, O readers, stand up in all awe and reverence, for the noble figures of Nana Sahib Peshwa and the Queen of Jhansi are because the stand up in awe and reverence because the noble figures of Nana Sahib Peshwa and the Queen of Jhansi are coming on the stage of history. We do not know which to describe more, the splendor of the mountain tops of Matharan in the holy Maharashtra, or the green velvet soft grassy meadows adorning the feet of those hills. In the lap of the graceful plateau below, almost overhung by the sky reaching peaks of the Matharan, there nestled a tiny village called Venu, heightening the beauty of the already beautiful region. Among the old and respectable families of Venu, the family of Madhavrao Narayan Bhatt was the most prominent. Madhavrao and his noble wife Gangabai, though living in circumstances of domestic poverty, they were still happy in the enjoyment of mutual love. Dostoevsky जैसा love story. In the small house of this good family, all faces beamed with joy and happiness in 1824 because the good Gangabai had given birth to a son. That son of Madhavrao and Gangabai was no other than the Peshwa Nana Sahib, at the very sound of whose name the Firangi shudders with fear. That same Nana, who has made his name immortal in history as a hero who fought for liberty and for his country. About the same time, the last Bajirao had abdicated his throne and was leading a life of retirement on the banks of Ganges. Many Maratha families had followed him, and hearing that Bajirao was generous enough to support them in good state on his pension, many new families also emigrated thither. Among the latter was the family of Madhavrao, who went to Brahmavarta in 1827 to seek the generosity of Bajirao. There, the little son of Madhavrao captivated the heart of Bajirao, and little Nana Sahib became a great favorite of the whole Darbar. His spirit, even in childhood, his serious Mayan, and his intelligence made a deep impression upon Bajirao, who eventually resolved to adopt him. On the 7th of June 1827, Bajirao formally placed him on his lap and adopted him. At this time, Nana was only 2.5 years old. In this manner, the child born in the village of Venu became, by a stroke of luck, the heir presumptive to the throne of the Peshwas. It was no doubt a great good fortune to be made heir to the seat of the Peshwas of the Maratha Empire. But oh brilliant prince, do you realize the great responsibility? Now this is Savarkar talking to Nana Sahib, okay? What a insane way of writing. But oh brilliant prince, do you realize the great responsibility accompanying this good fortune? The throne of the Peshwas is not an ordinary thing. It was on this that the great Baji sat and ruled an empire. It was for this that the battle of Panipat was fought. On this have been poured the sacred waters of the Sindhu for the anointing of generations of Peshwas. On this the treaty of Wadgaon had been made, and most important of all, on this is to come, or why already has come, the contaminating touch of slavery. Do you realize all this? To be an heir to a throne is to undertake to guarantee the protection and dignity of the throne. Then will you, or will you not, guard the dignity of the Peshwa throne? Either the gadi should be adorned with the crown of victory, or it should be burnt in a brilliant pyre of glory, like the proud women of Chittor who committed jihad. Okay, there is no third way of saving the glory of the Peshwa's throne. Oh brilliant prince, think of this terrible responsibility and then sit on the gadi of the Peshwas. Since your father gave reason for the taunt that the Peshwa's Gadi surrendered, the whole of Maharashtra has become black with shame and all desire that if the Gadi is to end after all, it should not, it should end even as it begun. That if it is to die, it should die fighting. Sit profoundly on that Gadi, O young Nana, so that history may say with pride that the Gadi whose first Peshwa was Balaji Vishwanath had for its last occupant Nana Sahib. At about the same time in sacred Varanasi, there lived in the retinue of Chimnaji Appa Peshwa, Moropan Tambe and his wife Bhagirathi Bai. Little did the couple know at the time that their name would be immortal in history. This couple had the good fortune of giving birth to a daughter who was seen to a veritable flashing sword in the hands of Hindustan. This couple hardly understood its good fortune. Do the do the thorny branches know that in the spring a rose, delighting all its fragrance, would spring forth from out of them? ये क्या कांटा को पता है कि उसमें फूल खिलेगा? क्या स्टाइल है लिखने का? But though the branches knew it not, but though the branches knew it not, still, as soon as the springtime of Hindustan came, the flower did come forth. It was in 1835 that Bhagirathi gave birth to the heroine Rani Lakshmibai. This brave woman's name in youth was Manubai. When Manu was hardly 3 or 4 years old, the whole family left Banaras and went to the court of Bajirao at Brahmavarta. There she was much liked by all the people that they called her Chaveli. Prince Nana Sahib and the sweet Chabeli. When two such children braced each other in childish affection, what a sight must it have been to the people of Brahmavarta! What eyes would not glisten with joy to see Prince Nana Sahib and the Chabeli playing together in harmony and learning their lessons in swordplay, lessons that they were destined to use in later life for the defense of their country and their religion. How limited indeed is the vision of man! When Nana Sahib and Lakshmi Bai were learning swordplay together, the spectators did not see the future glory of these brilliant children, and now we who do see their glory, we no longer see the good fortune, we no longer have the good fortune to have seen those children's games of the past. What a great way to construct this imagery, okay? बोल रहे हैं कि जो लोग इतने लकी थे कि उन दोनों का बचपन का ट्रेनिंग देखा, उन लोगों को ये नहीं देखने को मिला या पता भी नहीं था कि ये लोग बाद में जाके इतना हीरोइक काम करेंगे। और अब जब हमको इन हाइंडसाइट पता है कि ये लोग हीरोज थे, हमको उन उन इनका बचपन में उनका ट्रेनिंग देखने को नहीं मिला। सच इज द वो लिमिटेशंस ऑफ मैन्स विजन। How limited indeed is the vision of man, yes. Still, if to remove the short sightedness of these eyes of flesh, we put on the spectacles of imagination, then we can easily see those games of the past. While Nana Sahib and Rao Sahib, his cousin, were learning their lessons under their tutor, this Chabeli too would closely watch them, and thus she learned to read, though stumbling often. Nana Sahib would be sitting in Howrah on an elephant, and the sweet child would affectionately call up to him, "Won't you take me too?" Sometimes Nana would lift her up, and both would learn to ride the magnificent animal. Sometimes Nana would be on a horse and wait for Lakshmi to come and join him. Just then she would come up galloping with a sword at her side, with her hair slightly dishevelled by the wind, and her fair complexion becoming ruddier by her efforts to curb the spirited horse, and both red, meaning becoming more red, because she's so tensed up trying to control the horse. And both would start away at a smart pace. At this time, this is Savarkar imagining, okay, a day in their lives in those days, seeing them training, okay. At this time, and both would start away at a smart pace. At this time, Nana was 18 years old and Lakshmi Bai was 7 years old. What a pleasant memory to us that the heroine should have started her training for the holy war at the age of 7. These two jewels were extremely fond of each other from their earliest childhood. In Brahmavarta at that time were being brought up three of the most important characters of the Revolutionary War of 1857, Nana Sahib, Queen Lakshmi Bai and Tantia Top. It is said that on every festival of Yamadvitya, these two, Nana Sahib and Lakshmi Bai, historical brother and sister, used to perform the ceremony of Bhaubij. We can well picture to ourselves the sweet, attractive, spirited Chabeli with a golden dish and with lamps in her hand performing the ceremony. Such occasions when a Lakshmi Bai is waving the sacred lamp round the face of a Nana Sahib. Such occasions make history more romantic than romance. Listen to this line. Such occasions make history more romantic than romance itself. क्या क्या स्टाइल है लिखने का. In the early life of Nana Sahib and Manubai, we have the key to their future greatness. Their flesh and blood, even in early childhood, had been permeated by the love of Swaraj and a noble sense of self respect and pride of ancestry. In 1842, Chabeli was given in marriage to Maharaja Gangadhar Rao Baba Sahib of Jhansi and thus became Maharani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi. She was extremely popular at the court of that place and gained the affection and devoted loyalty of all her subjects, as the later part of this history will show. In 1851, the Peshwa Bajirao II died. Let not a single tear be shed for his death, because after losing his own kingdom in 1818, this blot in the escutcheon of the Peshwas spent his time in helping to ruin the kingdoms of other kings. He saved considerably on the pension of 8 lakhs of rupees allowed to him by the company's government and invested it in the notes of the company. Later, when the English went to war with Afghanistan, he helped them with a loan of 50 lakhs out of his savings. Ninad is saying D as in the, not D as in the. Okay, so Gadi. Interesting. Double D. Gadi. As in the, not day. Interesting. Gadi. Loan of 50 lakhs out of his savings. Soon after, the English went to war with the Sikh nation of Punjab, and all were in hopes, and the English in fears that the Maratha at Brahmavarta would make common cause with the Sikh misalas against the English power. They thought, oh shit, अब तो ये Sikh और Hindu united हो जाएंगे, तब क्या होगा? When almost the whole of India was fighting against Aurangzeb, Sri Guru Govind Singh, after a defeat in Punjab, had come into Maharashtra, it is said, to enter into an active alliance with the Marathas. Now it seemed that the Marathas would go into northern India on a similar occasion and perform the unfulfilled promises of the alliance. Gaddi. Yeah, Gaddi. Right. Seat. Yes, Godi in Bengali. I get it now. Now it seemed that the Marathas would go into northern India on a similar mission and perform the unfulfilled promises of the alliance. But Baji spoiled the sport at the 11th hour. This Baji, this Peshwa of Shivaji and his descendants, spent money out of his own pocket and sent 1000 infantry and 1000 cavalry to the assistance of the English. This Bajirao had not troops to protect his own Shaniwarwada, but he could spare troops enough to help the enemy to desecrate the house of Guru Gobind Singh. Oh, unfortunate nation! The Marathas should take the kingdom of the Sikhs, and the Sikhs should take the kingdom of the Marathas. And all this for what? In order that the English might dance in joy over the corpses of both. We have rather to thank the god of death that such a traitor, this Baji, died before 1857. Oh, okay. Someone else is saying that it's Gadi, not Gaddi. Okay. Okay, so maybe in Marathi it's pronounced Gadi. In Hindi I have heard the word Gaddi, and in Bengali we call it Godi. Before his death, Bajirao made a will by which he bequeathed all the rights of succession and powers of the Peshwa to his adopted son Nana Sahib. But immediately on the news of Bajirao's death, the English government announced that Nana Sahib had no right whatsoever to the pension of 8 lakhs. तो इसका भी ले लिया. What must have Nana Sahib thought on hearing this decision of the English? The conflict of passions in his heart is portrayed to some extent in the dispatch written under his direction. It says, "It is simply unjust that the high family of the Peshwa should be treated by the company so lightly as this. When our throne and kingdom were handed over to the company by Srimant Bajirao, it was done so on the condition that the company should pay 8 lakhs of rupees every year as its price. If this pension is not to last forever, how can the surrender of the kingdom, which was given as a consideration of for this pension, last forever in your hands? That one part alone should be bound by the contract, while the other intentionally fails to do its part is absurd, unjust, and inconsistent. Then follows a clear and well reasoned quote unquote passage refuting the theory that he, being an adopted son, cannot get his father's rights, citing authorities from Hindu Shastras, from rules of politics and customary law. After that, the dispatch of Nana Sahib continues. The company puts forward another excuse to cease to pay the pension, namely that Bajirao II has saved a considerable sum which is quite sufficient to defray the expenses of his family. But the company forgets that the pension was given as a condition of the treaty, and there is no single clause in the treaty directing the mode in which the pension should be spent. The pension is the price of the kingdom given, and Bajirao would have been justified had he saved even the whole of the pension. We ask the company whether they have got the least right to question the manner in which the pension is expended. Nay, can the company ask even its own servants as to how they spend their pensions, or what they can save out of it? But it is strange that a question which the company dare not ask even of its own servants is raised in the case of their heir to a royal dynasty, and is made the pretense to break a treaty. With this argumentative and spirited dispatch, Nana's faithful ambassador Azimullah Khan left for England. One of the important characters in the Revolutionary War of 1857, the name of Azimullah Khan is one of the most memorable. Among the keen intellects and minds that first conceived the idea of the War of Independence, Azimullah must be given a prominent place. And among the many plans by which the various phases of the revolution were developed, the plans of Azimullah deserve special notice. Azimullah was very poor by birth. He rose gradually on the strength of his own merits and at last became the trusted advisor of Nana Sahib. His early poverty was such that he served as a waiter in the household of an Englishman. Even while in such a low state, the fire of ambition was always burning in his heart. He took advantage of his profession as a bawarchi in order to learn foreign languages, and in a short time he had learned to speak English and French with fluency. After acquiring knowledge of both these languages, Azimullah left the service of the Firangis and began to study in a school at Kanpur. By his extraordinary ability, he soon became a teacher at the self-same school. While still serving as a teacher in the government school at Kanpur, his reputation as an able scholar reached the ears of Nana Sahib, and he was introduced at the Brahmavarta Darbar. Once at the Darbar, his wise counsels were appreciated and valued by Nana Sahib, who would take no important step without first consulting Azimullah. In 1854, he was made the chief representative of Nana Sahib and sent to England. His face was noble, his speech sweet and silvery. Knowing very well the customs and manners of contemporary English life, he soon became very popular among Londoners. Attracted by his pleasant and silvery voice, his spirited Mayan and Oriental magnificence, several young English women fell in love with Azimullah. There used to be a crowd in those days in the parks of London and on the beach at Brighton to see this jeweled Indian quote unquote Raja. Some English women of respectable families were so much infatuated with him that even after his return to India, they would send him letters couched in the most affectionate terms. When later Havelock's army captured Brahmavarta, he saw there the original letters written by some English ladies to their quote unquote darling Azimullah. But though English women were captivated by Azimullah, still the East India Company would not leave their stern attitude. They put him off for some time with beguiling words and at last gave the stereotyped answer. We entirely approve of the decision of the Government General that the adopted son of Bajirao has no claim whatever to his father's pension. Thus, as regards the principal object of his mission, he was disappointed. In a way, we say in a way because at this very moment, a new inspiration, a new hope was rising in his heart. There was no necessity of any foreigner's consent to realize this hope,
but it dependent for its realization on his own countrymen, for his own but it depended for its realization on his own country and countrymen, how to get the consent of his own men, how to acquire the independence of his country by force when it could not be acquired by Sama, Dama, or Bheda, conciliation, money, or division. These thoughts breathed a new hope and a new life into Azimullah's heart. At this self-same moment, right in the heart of London, a Brahmin was sitting, brooding over the means for the attainment of that which was unable to obtain, which he was unable to obtain by petition or by prayer, and his heart, filled with vengeance born of despair, was planning dozens of schemes for the attainment of his subject. This was Rango Bapuji of Satara. Azimullah, the representative of the Peshwa, often used to visit him, and they both used to hold secret consultations. Leaving these two, one, the representative of the Chhatrapati of Satara himself, and the other, the representative of the Prime Minister of the Chhatrapati, to the to the quiet and secret solution of the problem of saving the Hindu Empire, let us turn our attention to the activities of Nana Sahib. Fortunately, fortunate will be the day when a complete and systematic history of the life of Srimad Nana Sahib Peshwa will be before the world. Meanwhile, until such a day arrives, it would not be out of place to recount in brief some of the details of his life details of his life about this period, as published by the English historians, bitter enemies of Nana Sahib, as they were. We have already related incidentally the story of his youth. He had married a cousin of the chief of Sangli, while in the north in 1857 the revolution was being resolved upon. This relation of Nana Sahib was making strenuous efforts to achieve the same end in Maharashtra by working in the Patwardhan state. Nana had made Brahmavartar his home after the demise of his father. This city was in itself very beautiful, while the sacred Bhagirathi, which flowed close to the city walls, greatly added to its beauty. The palace of Nana commanded a most charming view. The palace of Nana commanded a most charming view. Before him stretched the quiet waters of the Bhagirathi. The banks were cheerfully alive with throngs of men and women, and beautiful temples of famed architecture raised their cupolas all along the banks. The palace of the Peshwa was a grand structure. Its political, administrative, and other offices, and the large its political, administrative and other offices, and the large shops and well-kept roads inside the gates amply testified to the activities within that palace. The many extensive halls within this palace were decorated with rich carpets and gorgeous tapestries, most valuable china, selected with faultless taste, magnificent candelabra, studded with diamonds, beautifully carved mirrors, carved ivory of finest workmanship, gold artworks richly set with diamonds, in short, all the luxury and taste and splendor of the Hindu palace were to be seen there. The steeds and camels of Srimant Nana Sahib were caparisoned in silver. Nana's fondness for horses was well known, and it is said that none could excel either him or Lakshmi Bai in horsemanship. His stables were a fine collection of splendid breeds. His stables were a fine collection of splendid breeds. His special hobby was animals, and people even from far off parts used to come to Brahmavarta to see his deer and his gazelles brought from various parts of India, his, uh, his camels and his pointers. Yet be it noted that above all things it was on his splendid collection of arms, meaning guns, that Srimant prided himself most. It included arms of all kinds and for all purposes, swords of best tempered steel, modern long range rifles, and big guns of various sizes. Binay Singh is saying they did break the mosques of Mathura, but Congress gave the land back to the masjid. I see, I think meaning is same then, but in Marathi pronunciation is different probably. Why did Marathas, after acquiring North, didn't break Babri, Gyanvapi, and Mathura mosques? No one cared for Muslim sentiments. This empathetic dogma is actually came from Bengalia, possible. Immensely proud of his high birth and conscious of his noble ancestry, Nana had quietly made up his mind that he would either live as became that noble parentage or pass away from memory altogether. It is a significant fact that in the main hall and in a prominent place were hung the portraits of those great and capable men who had adorned Maratha history. What did those faces speak to him? What did the portrait of Chhatrapati Shivaji say to him? What a tumult of feeling must have arisen in his mind when he saw Bajirao the First, the Bhau of Panipat, the youthful and regal Vishwas, the wise Madhava, and statesman Nana Furnavis in the portraits before him. The very consciousness that he was born in a family which could boast of such great names must have been constantly impelling him to what thoughts? Nana, there is no doubt, must have felt and felt terribly. क्या line है of Nana, there is no doubt, must have felt and felt terribly the woeful humiliation of petitioning to his enemies for a pension for that empire, of which his ancestors were the prime ministers, nay, the rulers. The stories of the noble deeds of the great Shivaji, whose memory he fondly cherished, must, without doubt, have set ablaze in his heart the flames of anger and vengeance. A Sanskrit proverb says, "The honorable prefer death over dishonor," and Nana was above all honorable. Generous as a prince, pride was his greatest wealth, as it always is of the brave. Hence, he could not bear the idea of accepting any invitation from the European officers about him, for he was not, as the Peshwa, entitled to the salute of guns, which the company was not willing to fire in his honor. He was serious constitutionally, and his habits were simple कि मैं जाऊंगा तो तोपों की सलामी देना पड़ेगा, तो वो नहीं देंगे, इसलिए इसलिए वो गए ही नहीं ब्रिटिश के पास. He had not a trace of extravagant habits or vices. An Englishman who had observed him closely on many occasions says that at the time he saw him, he was really about 28 years of age, but he looked 40. He was inclined to embonpoint. His face was round, his eyes restless like those of a tiger, while were piercing and of great lustre. His complexion was like that of any Spaniard. His conversation was characterized by a touch of humor. In the darbar, he was dressed in king cubs. Englishmen used to admire the jewelry he displayed about his person and meaning in his body, and his crowns studded with diamonds. His generous and sympathetic heart had effectually won the love of his subjects. His kindness to his subjects would be quite natural, but it is significant that Srimant was habitually generous even towards those very English people who, turning ungrateful, had deprived him of his all. If any youthful English couple wanted change of air, the rich equipage of Maharaja Nana Sahib was ready at their service. Many a Sahib, tired of living in Kanpur, used to pay a visit with this Mem Sahib to the town of Maharaja Nana Sahib, and presents of rich shawls and valuable pearls and diamonds were made to them on the occasion of their leaving Brahmavarta. It may be seen clearly from this that the poison of individual hatred never touched the noble soul of Nana. The elevated and heroic ideal of generously treating those very enemies with social courtesy and obligation, whom on the battlefield you would remorselessly destroy, has again and again been celebrated in the epics and histories of Hindustan. The Rajput heroes used to treat their bitterest enemies with splendid generosity. Be it noted, therefore, in this connection that there was considerably cordiality between Nana and the English at this time. As long as they could feast at the palace of the Srimant, the English officers and their wives were heaping friendly praise upon him. But as soon as he lilted the sword of righteousness, meaning dharma, in the cause of Swaraj and Swadesh on the battle of Kanpur, what ignominy and what low abuse they heaped on him. Okay, guys, so we will have to end here
because it's still a very long one, and we get the basic gist and vibe, and we are now aware of his writing skills, which was the main point of this live stream. And I will discuss a bit of the comment section now. And I'm basically insanely tired. I woke up at 7:30 in the morning, and I'm not being able to concentrate fully. But anyway, we get the point, and it's an excerpt anyway. We're not going to read the full book. Let me check some comments now. Why did Marathas, after acquiring North, didn't break Babri, Gyanvapi, and Mathura mosques? Because of our philosophy. That's what Veer Savarkar criticized in Six Glorious Epochs of Indian history as well. They also cared about Muslim sentiments, bro. They did break the mosques of Mathura, but Congress gave the land back to Idgah Masjidiya. I have just started this video, and no, I didn't even know about the existence of this book. No one cared for Muslim sentiments. This empathetic dogma is came from Bengal. Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Actually, I don't believe in this blame game or that cause and effect. Okay. Ooh, what do you think of the mosquito? Even Puri Shankaracharya is against it and was warned it will be a new Pakistan. Okay, now Puri Shankaracharya is against a lot of things. Dada, what do you think of Hindus today who don't give a fuck about their religious guru? Yes, we have Hindus of different degrees and shades, of course. If it is warring, yes. Mainly Puri Shankaracharya. Yes. Congress is Congress. Okay then. Thank you for joining the live stream, guys. Good night. See you soon.